On a bitterly cold Chicago street, Teresa Hensley, a homeless veteran, sits in despair, ignored by the bustling world around her. Then, unexpectedly, Donald Trump approaches. What happens next will leave you speechless. The biting wind cut through the streets of Chicago like a blade, sending a shiver through Teresa Hensley as she tightened her grip on the cardboard sign resting against her knees. Her fingers, red and raw from the cold, barely managed to hold steady as she adjusted her makeshift gloves, scraps of old fabric she'd found near a dumpster weeks ago. The sign's message, written in shaky black letters, read, "Homeless veteran. Anything helps." People rushed past her, bundled in thick coats and scarves, their hurried steps echoing against the pavement. Most avoided her gaze, their eyes fixed on their phones or the ground. A few glanced her way, only to quickly look away as if acknowledging her presence might somehow pull them into her world of misfortune. Teresa had grown used to the avoidance, but it still stung. She shifted uncomfortably on the cold concrete, her back pressing against the brick wall of a closed bakery. Memories of her time as an army medic flickered in her mind. She had once been someone who saved lives, someone who mattered. Now, she felt like a ghost, invisible and forgotten by the very country she had served. The occasional clink of coins landing in the old coffee cup beside her broke the silence of her thoughts. She murmured a soft "thank you" to the few who offered spare change, though the shame of her situation burned in her chest. She hadn't always been this way, this hollow version of herself. Her fall had been gradual, like a slow descent into quicksand. After returning from service, the nightmares had started. The screams, the blood, the faces of those she couldn't save, they haunted her. PTSD made it hard to hold a job, and medical bills piled up faster than she could handle. Soon, the apartment was gone, and with it, the last remnants of her old life. Teresa pulled her tattered coat tighter around her as a group of teenagers walked by, laughing loudly. One of them glanced at her, smirked, and muttered something to his friends. They all laughed harder. She turned her face away, her cheeks burning, not from the cold, but from the humiliation. She looked up at the gray sky, heavy with the promise of snow. Another long, cold night lay ahead. But despite her exhaustion and despair, a small part of her refused to let go. She didn't know what kept her clinging to that tiny thread of hope, but it was there, fragile as it was. As the city's noise swirled around her, Teresa whispered under her breath, almost as if praying to the wind, maybe tomorrow will be different. Little did she know, tomorrow was closer than she thought, and it would change her life forever. Teresa sat huddled against the icy stone wall, her thin jacket no match for Chicago's relentless wind. Her sign, scrawled with shaky letters, lay propped against a small pile of her belongings. Homeless veteran. Anything helps. She tried not to meet the eyes of the crowd bustling by, each pair of hurried footsteps a reminder of her invisibility. A black SUV rolled to a stop nearby, and a tall figure emerged, surrounded by a small group of men in sharp suits. Donald Trump was in the city for a business meeting, his brisk stride reflecting his usual determination. But as his gaze swept over the street, he suddenly slowed, his eyes landing on Teresa. Something about her posture, a blend of defiance and despair, pulled him from his focus. "Hold on," he said, raising a hand to his team. They paused, puzzled, as Trump walked toward the woman on the sidewalk. Teresa felt the shadow fall over her, but kept her eyes fixed on the pavement. When a voice spoke, deep and firm yet unexpectedly gentle, she glanced up. "Miss, what's your name?" She blinked, surprised. Most people passed her without a word, let alone a question. The man standing before her looked familiar, his face one she'd seen countless times on TV. "It's Teresa," she replied hesitantly, clutching her coat tighter. "Well, Teresa, I'm Donald Trump," he said, extending a hand. She stared at it for a moment before shaking it, her fingers trembling. "What happened?" he asked, crouching slightly to meet her eyes. His tone carried genuine concern, not the hollow politeness she was used to. Teresa hesitated, unsure if she should trust this stranger. But there was something about the way he waited, patient, attentive, that made her words spill out. She told him about her time as an army medic, her struggles with PTSD after returning home, and how a series of bad breaks had led her to this cold street corner. As she spoke, Trump's expression shifted. There was no pity, only quiet determination. "This isn't right," he said finally, standing up. Turning to his team, he issued swift instructions. "We need food, a doctor, and a warm place for her to stay now." The men scrambled to make calls as Teresa watched in stunned silence. For years, she had been invisible, another forgotten veteran. Now, in a matter of minutes, someone had not only seen her, but taken action. "Hang tight, Teresa," Trump said, his voice steady. "We're going to get you off the street." And for the first time in years, Teresa felt a flicker of hope. Teresa hesitated, unsure whether to trust the man now crouched in front of her. His tailored coat and commanding presence were at odds with the gritty backdrop of Chicago's winter streets. Yet his voice carried an earnestness she hadn't heard in years. "You served our country," Trump said, his tone firm but compassionate. "You shouldn't be out here like this." Before Teresa could respond, he stood and motioned to one of his security team members. "Get her a hot meal, something substantial, not fast food," he instructed. Turning back to Teresa, he asked, "When's the last time you saw a doctor?" She stammered, I don't remember." Without hesitation, Trump pulled out his phone, dialing someone directly. "Dr. Stevens? I need you to meet us at the Trump International Hotel. It's urgent." He paused, glancing at Teresa. Yes, for a veteran. Teresa's mind spun. The warmth of the food, now placed gently in her hands by one of Trump's aides, thawed her frozen fingers. She watched in disbelief as a black limousine pulled up to the curb. "This is for you," Trump said, gesturing to the vehicle. "They'll take you to the hotel. You'll have a warm bed and a hot shower waiting. And we'll get you the care you need." Tears welled in Teresa's eyes. Why are you doing this?" Trump knelt again, meeting her gaze. "Because no one who's sacrificed for this country should feel forgotten. And I don't leave good people behind." The limousine door opened, and Teresa hesitated before stepping in. As it drove away, she looked back at Trump through the rear window. He waved, his expression unwavering. Onlookers murmured, some snapping pictures, but Trump dismissed them with a curt gesture. To his team, he said, "This isn't a photo op. It's a responsibility." Inside the limousine, Teresa clutched the meal tightly. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of something she thought she'd lost: hope. The crisp morning air carried a sense of renewal as Teresa stepped off the bus, her hands gripping a small tote filled with essentials. She stood in front of the hospital, its towering glass windows reflecting the sunrise. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from the thrill of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Inside, she was greeted by the supervisor, a kind woman named Carla, who gave Teresa a reassuring smile. "You're going to do great here," Carla said as she handed Teresa her new badge. The title beneath her name read Patient Care Assistant. Teresa stared at it for a moment, pride swelling in her chest. This wasn't just a job, it was a new chapter. Her first day was challenging yet fulfilling. She spent hours helping patients with their needs, from adjusting pillows to comforting a nervous child awaiting surgery. Each task brought back flashes of her days as an army medic, where she'd saved lives on the battlefield. But here, the stakes felt different, gentler, more human. During a break, Teresa found herself chatting with a fellow assistant in the break room. "You're really good at this," her colleague said. "You have a way of putting people at ease." Teresa smiled, feeling the weight of years of self-doubt begin to lift. By the end of her shift, exhaustion mingled with a deep sense of accomplishment. As she walked home to her modest apartment, the keys to her new place jingled in her pocket, a sound she hadn't heard in years. The space was simple but warm, with a small kitchen, a cozy couch, and a bed that felt like a luxury compared to the cold concrete she once slept on. Teresa sat by the window, watching the city lights twinkle. She sipped a cup of tea, her thoughts drifting to the moment Trump had stopped to talk to her. His act of kindness had been the catalyst, but her own determination had carried her here. For the first time in a long while, Teresa allowed herself to dream again. She thought of the veterans she'd met during her time on the streets and resolved to pay the kindness she'd received forward. Her journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. The sun was setting behind Chicago's skyline as Teresa sat across from Donald Trump in a quiet corner of a cafe, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped a cup of coffee. The weight of gratitude pressed heavily on her chest, yet there was a lightness in her heart that had been absent for years. She glanced at Trump, who sat across from her with a steady, almost paternal gaze, as if he could see the future unfolding before them both. "Mr. Trump," Teresa began, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you. You didn't just give me a place to stay, food, or medical help. You gave me back my life." Trump nodded, his expression softening, yet his gaze still firm with conviction. "You've done the hard work, Teresa. I just opened a door. It's you who walked through it." His words were simple but profound, and they resonated deeply within her. For a moment, there was silence between them. The weight of their shared understanding hung in the air. Teresa's transformation from a woman broken by circumstances to someone standing tall, with hope in her eyes, wasn't just a personal victory. It was proof that change was possible, that lives could be rebuilt if given a chance. "I want to do more than just thank you," Teresa continued, her voice gaining strength. "I want to help other veterans who are struggling like I did. There are so many out there, lost, ignored. If I can be a lifeline to even one of them, maybe they'll find the strength I didn't know I had until I met you." Trump leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "That's the spirit, Teresa. That's how real change happens. It's not about one person making a difference. It's about the ripple effect. You help one, and then they help another. That's how we build a better future." A surge of purpose filled her, pushing aside the lingering doubts that sometimes crept in. She'd seen enough pain in her own life to know that it was the willingness to act, to reach out, that would make the difference. It was no longer just about surviving, it was about giving others the hope she had found. "I'll be there," Teresa said, her words firm. "I'll be there for every veteran who needs a hand to hold. I'll be their lifeline, just like you were mine." Trump smiled, a rare, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I believe in you, Teresa. And remember, this isn't just about helping others. It's about showing them that they have the power to change their own lives. Don't forget to lift yourself as you lift others." As the conversation drew to a close, Teresa stood, her heart full. It wasn't just the life she had been given that mattered. It was the life she was now determined to give to others. With a final handshake, she left the cafe. The weight of gratitude. Subscribe to our channel for soul-stirring stories.